Now let's dive into the second part of our research. In Q1, what we started is we also started looking at US companies that not only need to comply with CCPA, but also need to comply with GDPR. And so in the research of 1,570 companies that we researched for CCPA compliance, we were also looking to see if these companies recognize that they need to comply with GDPR, and they stated that they need to comply with GDPR. So there were 257 companies out of 1,570 companies that said they need to comply with GDPR. And then as earlier, we bucketized them into 3 buckets. And for the 100 companies that were using automation solution under CCP of this cohort of 1,570 companies, 12 of them have adopted an automation solution, and 9 of them are doing manual processes, and the rest are not doing anything, right? The second bucket was manual processes. We found 533 companies were using manual processes. Of those 533 companies, 134 companies said they need to comply with GDPR, and the third bucket was 102 companies, which are predominantly using manual processes, that are also the companies that are non-compliant under CCPA. Overall, 16% of the companies that said they need to comply with CCPA were also required to comply with GDPR as per their privacy policy statements. Of that, less than 5% are using automation solution, 95% are using manual processes. Then we broke this data into top states. And if you look at the top 5 states, you would see that 46% of the companies of whom they say they need to comply with GDPR come from these 5 states. Interestingly, 4 out of the 5 states are from East Coast. So I don't know if it is an anomaly or an interesting finding, but you'll see that 4 of the 5 states are from East Coast. Then we looked into vertical-based data, and 77% of the companies that needed to comply with GDPR come from these 5 verticals. And you would see that pretty much all these verticals are B2C companies predominantly, and finance is missing. If you remember, under CCPA, finance was the 3rd top vertical. Here, finance is not even in the first 5. Next, we broke this data into based on the company size, employee size, as well as B2B versus B2C. There was not a market difference between B2B versus B2C in terms of automation versus manual processes. Similarly, if you go to B2C companies, as we said earlier, B2C companies were a lot more eager to implement an automation solution versus using manual processes versus B2B. So that ends our research findings. Would encourage you folks to ask any questions you might have about the research that we did and how we concluded with the data. Other observations that we saw and we found during Q1 were increasingly we have seen and we have heard customers saying that a large percentage of the requests they're receiving are delete requests. And also they are telling us that increasingly more and more requests are coming from these aggregators. So those are the 2 common things that we have heard in the market that we thought we'd share.